Syrskyi's emergency statement. Putin left for Belarus, as well as Trump's important statements. We're talking to Roman Svitan today. Roman, welcome back and thank you for joining us. Viewers, leave your likes and share your opinions on the topics we're discussing. What do you think is the purpose of Putin's visit to Belarus? What do you think about the situation on the front and Trump's statements? Write from which city and country you are watching us. Let's start with the fact that the day before, Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi made an important statement. The armed forces of Ukraine have stopped the Russian offensive in Sumy. The front line has been stabilized. Ukraine is holding back 50,000 Russian military in this direction. We have been talking about this for several weeks, and now we have official confirmation of Roman's words. The offensive has been stopped. The situation is stable. Roman, how would you characterize the current state of affairs? For something to happen, but there was no offensive there. We have been discussing this with you for several months. There was a retreat of our troops from the Kursk territory, followed by the Russians entering the Sumy land, so it cannot be called a full-fledged offensive. Information flows were full of statements that the main direction of the Russian offensive would be Sumy, Kiev, and other cities. The most surprising thing is that even our deputies picked up this disinformation. There was simply nothing to attack with. They had 50,000 people. What can there be talk of an offensive? It was a Russian group of 50,000 men trying to push us out of the Kursk direction. We should not have resisted on the spot. We should have withdrawn in advance to the prepared lines along the border, approximately from Tyotkinoy to Suja. It should have been done back in January. You and I, by the way, have talked about this repeatedly. For a month and a half or 2 months, I held a position in this direction. Then the situation changed so much that we had to urgently retreat from the Kursk direction. Moreover, we delayed on the Kurchin offensive until the representatives of the office established contact with the Russians in Saudi Arabia. All almost simultaneously began to withdraw from the Kursk direction. The Russian group of about 50,000 people entered Sumy, literally following our units. Then it became clear that if this group could be stopped, it had to be done immediately. However, they themselves were exhausted. The number of attacks significantly decreased, not because we stopped them, but because they ran out of reserves allocated for the Kursk direction. They did not transfer new ones, because they sent all the fresh forces to the Eastern Front. The fact that Syrskyi was carrying out a combat mission in the Sumy region was just to the advantage of the Russians. It was a distraction. We have been discussing this for several months now. Last year, the Russians similarly created a threat near Volchansk and Kharkiv in Levtsi to distract our forces from Donbass. While they were creating the illusion of activity in one place, the real seizure of Donbass was underway in another. Now the same scheme is being repeated. Syrskyi is allegedly solving issues in the Sumy region with a saber, although operational commanders under the leadership of Syrskyi are effectively coping on the ground. This is a classic tactic described in military textbooks over the past millennia. If you want to strike, distract the enemy elsewhere. It is noteworthy that everyone reacted to the diversionary maneuver, from Ukrainian tabloids and Russian sources to some foreign publications, which fueled fears about the alleged preparation of a strike from Sumy to Kiev. Even in the Verkhovna Rada, there were specific throw-ins. Deputies positioning themselves as military experts were actively disseminating this information.
Включая украинские таблоиды, включая, само собой, россияне, некоторые зарубежные, рассказывая нам какие-то страхи о том, что россияне из-под Сум на Киев там пойдут. Вы помните, в Верховной Раде даже такие вбросы были конкретные. Депутаты там, великие военные, победуны, это тоже вбрасывали.
There could be no offensive operations on the Sumy direction, neither operational nor tactical level. for the same reason for which there were none in Kharkiv last year. There was simply nothing to attack with. Kharkiv is a city with a population of 1.5 million, Sumy, about 300,000. What can be captured with 50,000? At most, to temporarily occupy positions. Now our troops have accomplished their combat task there, but with huge losses. The question arises, why did we keep people there for so long, and now we have to recuperate? We will have to fight hard to regain our territory. Stopping the enemy is only half the battle. They still have to be pushed over the border. All this could have been prevented if we had not allowed them to enter Sumy region from the beginning. This issue has already been discussed many times, but it again falls back on the command, in particular, on the actions of Syrskyi. Now the main threat is in Donbas. There is an acute shortage of personnel there, and no decision has been made on the involvement of security forces. The situation is exactly the same as last year. You and I were saying the same thing exactly a year ago. Why distract ourselves in Kharkiv or other directions if the situation on the Eastern Front is critical? It seems as if the task is to cede Donbas step by step, part of it last year, part of it this year, and all this against the background of triumphant reports that somewhere in the Sumy region they managed to stop the offensive.
Поэтапно, что ли. То есть в прошлом году часть Донбасса отдали, в этом году часть Донбасса отдают. Но зато радостные такие докладывают о том, что где-то остановили наступление в районе Сум.
Roman, I should like to add that you and I and our fellow journalists are critical of certain statements by some MPs, so the question is rather rhetorical. Continuing the theme of the front, let us dwell in more detail on the situation in the Dnipropetrovsk region, because the enemy has about 600 meters left. The Russians have captured Novosergeyevka, near the administrative border. This was reported by a military man with the call sign Muchnoy. Roman, how do you assess this situation? Is it more of an information throw-in, or does it have a military basis? And if the enemy achieves certain results in this direction, what will this mean in practice, and how can they use it in the near future? The Russians have thrown into our information field a topic related to a noise grenade in the Sumy area. Last year they similarly claimed the capture of Kharkiv. Now they are claiming the capture of Sumy. In reality, the situation related to the Dnipropetrovsk region is repeated. This narrative is of a clickbait nature and does not reflect the real state of affairs. It is not about the Dnipropetrovsk region at all. The Russians are seizing Donbas. Now the issue of losing Donetsk region is being resolved, and this is the main thing. The authorities are inactive, making no effort to hold the key direction. The border with Dnipropetrovsk region is still about 600 meters away, and even if it is crossed tomorrow, it will not be a catastrophe. The fighting will continue as before. Donetsk is at stake, not Dnipropetrovsk. We have been talking about this for months. Russia's main goal in the summer campaign, based on the location of the front, is to expand the land corridor.
Не в 600 метрах. Ну, завтра они там эти 600 метров пройдут, зайдут на Днепропетровскую область, что с неба камни посыпятся, что ли? Да ну нет, конечно. То есть будут продолжаться боевые действия. Вопрос просто захвата Донецкой области сейчас на кону. Еще раз повторюсь, там дело не в Днепропетровской области, а именно в Донецкой. Опять же, направление, мы с вами об этом сколько говорим, несколько месяцев. Основная задача россиян на летнюю военную кампанию, это не инсайт, это исходя из расположения фронта как такового, расширить сухопутный коридор.
They are well aware of the situation. They have strong analytical services, whose specialists report, as soon as a second brigade of F-16s is available next year, we will be able to cross the land corridor. It is only 80 kilometers, which can be overcome with the support of 100 aircraft. Such an operation is quite feasible. Just look at Israeli air operations against Iran. The same types of planes, the same tasks. It is realistic to reach the Azov coast from the air, to penetrate the defenses, to make a massive airstrike. The Israelis cover distances of 1,500 kilometers, and here, only 80 kilometers, 8 minutes of flight. The Russians understand this and are trying to expand the corridor already this year, to seize part of Zaporizhzhia and most of Donetsk region. This is exactly what they are doing. Our fighters are consuming fuel in a powerful flow in the direction of Tokmak and Polog. The whole field near Orekov and Tokmak is boiling. A similar situation from Mariupol through Kamysh-Zarya, where they are putting pressure on the eastern flank of the Zaporizhzhia front. Troops, fuel, and ammunition are actively moving. The direction is being strengthened. It is there that the situation needs to be stabilized now, not in the Sumy direction. The problem is not in Dnipropetrovsk region, but in Pokrovsk. If the enemy starts an offensive from the south and southwest, he can surround the city and cut it off from Pavlograd. It's not about capturing Pavlograd or the whole region. The Russians' goal is Pokrovsk. Further, Dobropilya with an exit to the north and east, towards Konstantinovka and Slavyansk. The logic of actions can be traced by building up pressure in the area of Bogatyr, northwest of Velika Novosholka. Globally, Dnipropetrovsk region is not threatened now. The main task of the enemy is to capture Pokrovsk and advance from the south and southwest to it.
Днепропетровской области на данный момент, в смысле глобальном, абсолютно ничего не угрожает. Для россиян важен Покровск, с юга зайти, с юго-запада в сторону Покровска.
Roman, I suggest we move on to other, more global topics, in particular to the statement by Lithuanian President Nausėda, who the day before expressed the opinion that the war in Ukraine will not end in the next 3 years. In recent months, we have been hearing contradictory information. Some sources say that the war may move into another phase, others say that it may end, or there are third options. You and I have discussed these issues on a number of occasions, particularly in the context of the need to debunk Russian information and psychological operations. How do you assess such statements? How realistic are they in the current military situation? And what do you think the Lithuanian president meant by them? Without reaching the state border, the war will not end. The first signals of a possible end of hostilities will appear only when Ukrainian troops are lined up along the 1991 borders, including the liberation of Crimea, Donbass, and the land corridor. This is a step-by-step process. The liberation of Crimea will require at least one full summer military campaign. Cutting the land corridor and dislodging Russian troops from the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions will require another campaign of at least 2 years. Work on Donbass will require a comprehensive approach. The Russian economy must be undermined so that the process of internal disintegration begins and the constituent republics seek independence. This will deprive Russia of the ability to provide the rear of Donbass from Rostov, Taganrog, and the eastern regions. Only in this way can success be achieved. We will have to work on Donbass for 2 more years because it is necessary to cut it off from Russia, tentatively along the line of the Syrskyi Donets and the Don to Rostov. Taganrog and part of the Rostov region must be brought back under control. There is no other way, as we cannot take Donbass head-on. There are heights of 300-350 meters, old mountainous areas, and we have no opportunities to advance upwards. The only viable route is to bypass through Luhansk, along the Don River down to the Sea of Azov, followed by clearing operations in Donbass. This liberation effort could take at least 3 to 4 years, assuming there's pressure on Russia, especially its economy and oil sector. However, this pressure is being blocked, notably by the administration itself, which has halted strikes on Russia's oil infrastructure. As a result, the process will be prolonged. Baltic partners are aware of this, hence their statements about the war lasting at least 3 more years. It's not just about aid anymore, but systematic arms deliveries. General Syrskyi should not be in the Sumy region, but rather near Pokrovsk, where the main concentration of Russian forces is advancing across the Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk-Luhansk front. If for some reason the supply of American arms, even those already paid for by us or our partners, is delayed, another year will have to be added to the deadline, because we will have to organize their production in Europe. Without these supplies, the war will drag on for at least a year longer. Therefore, we must clearly realize that we will have to fight for 3 to 4 years. It is good that our partners understand this, our European allies and the Baltic states, which have been supporting us since 2014. That is why they are calling these deadlines. They are realistic. They see all the dynamics of what is happening and continue to provide assistance. In light of this, it is interesting to know your opinion of the recent statement by Latvian President Nausėda.
Друзі, що ви думаєте щодо заяви президента Литви Наусєди прямо зараз? Це дуже важливо почути вашу думку, тому що у нас думаюча аудиторія.
It is very important to hear your opinion, because the audience is closely following the events. What do you think about the predictions that the war in Ukraine will not end in the next 3 years? Share your thoughts and assessments in the comments after the video. We are interested in reading your opinion, and we really do. Viewers are encouraged to share their city and country when tuning in and to like the video to support Roman Svitan's analysis. Recently, the head of Ukraine in NATO stated, based on unofficial reports, that the US might supply Ukraine with 5 Patriot missile systems. Roman is asked for his thoughts on this possibility, its impact on Ukraine's air defense, and how such a move would align with the broader political strategy of the Trump administration.
Patriot, як це може посилити нашу протиповітряну оборону, та наскільки це в цілому зараз лягає в політику Трампа?
From a technical point of view, the United States can give Ukraine not only 5, but even 55 Patriot systems. The Americans themselves will never use them. From whom should they defend themselves? From Canadians or Mexicans? Of course not. They simply do not need these systems, especially since they have another system deployed, THAAD, which is the main one. Patriot systems in the US are mostly in storage and are practically not used. The main American anti-missile system is Aegis, designed to intercept intercontinental ballistic missiles at altitudes of up to 1,500 kilometers. By comparison, Patriot operates at altitudes of only 15 to 20 kilometers. The difference is obvious. Patriot is not relevant to the Americans, and they could quietly supply Ukraine with much more than 5 installations and cover key areas. But for political reasons, this is not happening. Even in the Middle East, Patriots do not always work effectively. Recent Iranian ballistic strikes have shown that even Patriot systems have not been used. They are already in storage. Instead, more modern systems such as HETS, Arrow 3, David's Sling, and THAAD have been deployed. At the same time, even these systems do not have time to intercept all targets, especially in the case of massive attacks with false and maneuvering objects. A similar approach is possible for Ukraine. Patriot deployment at least partially covers our cities and key directions. However, the Allies have so far refused to supply them. Under these circumstances, the best option may be a mirror response. How Iran acted to avoid strikes on its territory, it directed ballistic missiles at Israel. Of the 500 fired, 20 to 30% passed, with about 1,500 more in reserve. Ballistics in such a case becomes a tool of mirror effect. Russia needs to develop a reflex, look in the direction of Ukraine, get hit back.
1500 ракет еще осталось у Ирана. Вот баллистика. Это так называемый зеркальный удар. Россиянам надо рефлекс выработать. Как только косо посмотрели в сторону Украины, полетели баллистика, кстати, по Москве.
Moscow should be hit exclusively with ballistic missiles. This is Russia's key pain point, its Achilles heel. They were always talking about Crimea, Moscow, and Russia's elevator. The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia should have the same approach. Any aggression against Estonians in Narva should immediately trigger a salvo of at least 10 ballistic missiles aimed at Moscow from a distance of 600 to 700 kilometers. Estonia and Latvia need these missiles vitally. The situation with Lithuania is different. It has no direct border with Russia, only with the Kaliningrad region, but this does not cancel the general logic. What is more important for us now is not air defense systems like Patriot, but ballistics. It is necessary to launch strikes on Moscow, ignoring the rest of Russia. 17 million square kilometers cannot be broken. but Moscow is vulnerable. This is what I wanted to show. Attacks of this type are extremely painful, as Iran's recent strikes on Israel demonstrated.
А вот Москву можно. И именно это и показал, что такого рода атаки, они очень болезненные, это показал иранские атаки по Израилю.
Roman, it is not only Moscow that is attracting attention, because information has just come to light about the publication of the first photographs from the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Ingushian police from the scene of the explosion at the North Caucasus College. Details are still very scarce. What do you know about this? Who could be behind this incident? Please share your analysis. Now, all over Russia, people who are not indifferent are becoming active and are supporting us, primarily acting in the interests of their own republics. These are resistance forces seeking at the very least to free themselves from the control of Moscow, which holds 21 republics in its orbit, as well as including Crimea in its constitution, and controlling dozens of other administrative entities, krays, oblasts, and others. As soon as they get a chance, they will rush to independence. First of all, the Caucasus, Ichkeria, Ingushetia, Dagestan, where there are strong movements for sovereignty. Ingushetia, by the way, is recognized by us as an independent state, and we have working ties with its government in Izmail. A similar situation is taking shape in the Far East, including within the Far Eastern Ukrainian People's Republic, as I call it.
Ингушетию как суверенное государство, у нас с ними есть налаженные связи с правительством в изгнании. Вот та же самая картина и по дальневосточной, моей любимой дальневосточной Украинской Народной Республике.
The Don People's Republic, established in 1917, existed until 1922, when it was dispersed by the VCHK and its leaders were forced to flee to Manchuria. Nevertheless, tens of thousands of Ukrainians, descendants of settlers sent to Zeleny Klin 100 years ago, still live in that region. It's turbulent there today too. An oil refinery burned in Komsomolsk-on-Amur, as we discussed a month and a half ago. Recently, there have been large-scale fires in the Chita area, including explosions and self-detonations at Russian military warehouses. All of this is the actions of the indifferent, who are operating in a free-hunting mode to the best of their ability. Information is emerging that not only dry wood and grass near ammunition depots are being set on fire, but also forests in areas where pipelines, oil and gas pipelines, pass. Such actions are causing serious damage to Russia's oil infrastructure. Everyone contributes to the common task where they can.
Есть информация о том, что поджигают там не только склады, то есть траву, там, где склады с боеприпасами, а поджигают чуть ли не леса, сухостои, там, где проходят трубопроводы, нефтепроводы российские, то есть газопроводы, нефтепроводы, помогают украинской задаче вырубить всю российскую нефтянку. То есть каждый на своем месте как-то эту задачу выполняет.
Roman, we have information that Russian dictator Putin has arrived in Belarus for a 2-day visit to his colleague Lukashenko. What do you know about this? Why, in your opinion, he decided to leave now, as Putin very rarely leaves the territory under his control? What is the reason for this, and is it appropriate to see it as preparation for joint military exercises that are planned in Belarus in a few months? It is clear that he did not go there for potatoes, although he might have wanted to. Lukashenko could have organized it. But seriously, the Belarusian direction is of key importance for Putin now. The exercises are planned for the fall, and it is their details that he probably came to discuss. Scenarios, objectives, participation of troops. Lukashenko has lately clearly realized that he could be under serious attack, especially his economy. If he again allows Putin to drag Belarus into aggressive actions, be it against Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, or an attempt to pass through the Suwalki corridor, the consequences will be serious.
Он может попасть под серьезный удар, особенно экономика Беларуси. Если опять допустит какой-то выбрики путинские с выходом в Украину, в Литву, в Латвию, в Эстонию, то есть со стороны в Эстонии не получится, в Литву, Латвию, или там в сторону того же Сувалского коридора.
Lukashenko is well aware that he will do everything possible to avoid critical scenarios. Recently, he was visited by Kalak, the American special envoy for the Eastern Direction associated with Trump. I believe that Putin came to Belarus precisely to clarify positions and determine in which direction Lukashenko's foreign policy will unfold. The latter now has a window of opportunity. He has a working relationship with Xi Jinping and seems to feel himself under the Chinese umbrella. Also, Kalak has been visiting Minsk not only to work out the possible participation of Belarus, but also to put pressure on Ukraine, perhaps in order to launch a conditional Minsk III project. They may be preparing the ground for a potential meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump, where an agreement could be discussed. While Erdogan also suggests Istanbul as a negotiating platform, Minsk remains an option, especially as an element of forcing Ukraine to make concessions. Clearly, Putin is pursuing several objectives at once, and some of them directly affect Ukraine.
Потому много вопросов, которые может решать Путин сейчас. Еще раз повторюсь, часть из них точно нас касается.
The fact is that our audience is closely following the visit of dictator Putin to Belarus. We will read your opinions, Roman, under this video in the comments, and we can't help but ask about what the Western press is actively writing. Trump has started to use a harsher tone towards Putin, while at the same time he expressed sympathy for Ukrainian President Zelensky, calling him very nice. Roman, given these messages and information about the possible transfer of Patriot systems to Ukraine, is it appropriate to consider that Trump is changing his rhetoric towards both Ukraine and Russia? How do you perceive these signals appearing in the Western press? Trump did not help Iran, and could only do so in one case, if there was an agreement between them. At the same time, he is not helping Ukraine either. This parallel connection is already being seen. Trump's current rhetoric is probably related to the desire to realize the scenario of Ukraine's capitulation. If Zelensky agrees to certain concessions, Trump shows him favor. Putin, in this case, seeks more. For example, hypothetically, if Zelensky is willing to give up all the temporarily occupied territories, Putin demands even more: the regions that Russia has fully incorporated into its constitution, the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions, up to the right bank. In this configuration, Trump's rhetoric may fluctuate. Zelensky is willing to concede less, Putin wants more, and Trump is looking for a compromise. But in both scenarios, Ukraine loses more than 20% of its territory. Neither the first nor the second scenario suits us. Therefore, Trump's rhetoric and who he supports are irrelevant to us. The main thing is that the very idea of capitulation, loss of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of the state is absolutely unacceptable for us, Ukrainians and Cossacks. Land and will are the basis of our identity and values. Everything else has no direct relation to us. Roman, thank you for your conversation, analysis, and clear position. Roman Svitan, instructor colonel in reserve of the Ukrainian army, answers the most important questions on a daily basis. Friends, right now put a like on this video in support of the analyst. Write your thoughts on the topics we discussed today, in particular about the end of the war and Putin's visit to Lukashenko. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to indicate what exactly you think about it. Also subscribe to the channel and see you on the air on 24.
І також не забувайте про підписку та побачимось в ефірі на 24-му.